Check Complete, a referee podcast, is an educational resource for referees by referees, designed to connect and develop soccer officials of all ages and skill levels to better serve the game both on and off the field. Welcome back to another episode of the Check Complete podcast. I'm Gordie, your host. This is episode number 23, the MJ episode, as you so crassly joked about earlier. And you are?
Travis Smith.
This is Travis. He's a friend of the podcast. This is his second episode back. I didn't even look. Do you remember your first episode? What number that was? You don't know. You're worthless. There was one. I don't remember what episode it was that he was on. The first the first listener to comment the episode gets a round of applause that he was on. So it's great to have you back, Travis.
Thanks. Excited to be back.
Yeah, this is awesome. So
episode 8.
Episode number 8, says the voice from behind the camera. Episode 8 with Travis Smith. So thrilled to have you back today. We've got a great episode put together. Or at least, I think it's great. So we've got a conversation. Well, Travis and I'll catch up. We'll catch up. And then we've got another segment of Coffee with Christina. We're talking about self-talk. So this is a super, super important concept as we go about the work as officials. And for those who are listening and watching that might not be officials, you can probably imagine some of the positive self-talk that is needed for referees, people that are in this line of work as they are subject to so much criticism and rapid decision-making. So we'll have that episode with Christina, which just a huge thank you again to her for her time. It's just wonderful conversations with her as she lends us some of her expertise. And then as far as expertise goes, we have another expert, an AR expert, I should say, Ryan Graves, who just finished his second year in the MLS. He talks about his career, he talks about his journey, he talks about some life off the field, as well as a crowning achievement early in his career that he experienced this last fall. So hopefully you enjoy those interviews as much as we did. So Travis, last time we saw you, I don't know if you had officially started your new role?
I was thinking you were going to say I had started officiating. I had not started my new role coaching.
So you're still with the University of Kansas.
Indeed.
Rock Chalk there.
Rock Chalk.
And so you are now a full-time assistant with them.
Yes, sir. Yep.
With them. So he's repping the company swag. Very good. So you started in a full-time assistant role, which sadly means we'll probably not see you officiating this spring in high school soccer.
I'm going to try and get some C-team games on Wednesdays.
Yeah. So your fall season, let's just have a Big 12 referee roast session. Okay, that's a bad idea. So you had your first season refereeing back in the spring, and then you're back on the sidelines in the fall. What were some of the highs and lows? I don't know. What was that experience like?
Yeah, high was definitely getting back in between the lines, officiating our inter-squad scrimmage in preseason. I only got yelled at a few times, much higher level than any game that I had ever officiated officially. So that was exciting. Had another awesome moment at University of South Florida. We played at Tampa, and I guess we can talk a little bit more about that here in a second, but definitely going to be a shout out to Megan Mullen for a pretty epic moment of expertise.
Yeah. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about it right now.
Jump right into it.
Let's just jump right into it. So you're at South Florida, and you had a moment where Megan Mullen, who is a FIFA assistant referee, she was actually refereeing in the middle of your game there.
Yep.
Okay. So dive into this.
So in the second half, South Florida is all over us, tons of possession. We finally break pressure. We're on a counterattack. One of our forwards dribbles a couple of players, and right in the D of the 18 gets fouled egregiously. And before we can even stand up to yell, Megan looks like she's going to call a foul, which we wanted. The ball starts to trickle away from where the foul had occurred, and she lets advantage play, and honestly, our goal of the season gets scored. Our attacking mid, who's trailing the play, runs up and absolutely hammers one in the top corner. And it went from, why are you not calling that, to yeah, instantly. It was great. So the best part about this story is I felt the need to go tell her about how great she did officiating. And I started that conversation with, so I started refereeing this past spring, right? This is like a 5-month time lapse. And I refereed some very low-level high school games. And that I thought would give me the credibility to then tell her how great of a job she did calling advantage, which she didn't seem to need. But it was a spectacular display of advantage.
You love it. Yeah, that two things. One, Megan, if you're ever listening to this, if you're ever that bored or stoop yourself low enough to listen to this, we're huge fans. And then, if you remember this forgetful face in that encounter, that's kind of neat.
Yeah.
It's kind of a neat moment. But we'd love to talk with you more about that clip and your career, Megan, if you're listening. We'd love to hear about that. But
I can provide access to that clip.
Oh, we might need to see that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
We might need to see that. But that is people that are watching this that are referees are going, that's like one of the greatest things ever when refereeing is an advantage that leads to a goal.
Absolutely.
It's just...
I was a big Megan fan after that.
Yeah, I believe it. I can tell. Yeah. Okay, very good. So, yeah, that's awesome. So those are some of the I guess, the highlights, I suppose.
Unfortunately, the only highlights that pertain to officiating.
Yeah, we don't want to go down that road, but I don't know. Anyway, well, Travis, thanks for being here to help us co-host. You're going to sit in with our interview with Ryan, and we'll hear about his story. But first, we go to our segment with Christina, a little coffee with Christina. The Check Complete podcast is brought to you in part by JF Consulting Tax Preparation and Bookkeeping. Taxes suck, we can help. Coffee with Christina is back. I'm not Christina, I'm Gordie, and this is Christina. Yes. So today we're talking about self-talk. We're not the voices in my head. That's not what we're talking about.
No, I'm not skilled for that.
Okay, all right. Just schedule another appointment with the old psychiatrist.
I can refer you out.
Okay, there we go. Good. Okay, so let's talk about self-talk. This could go on and on for a long time because this is one for me that's has been a practice almost unconsciously, but now that I've learned more about it, I think it's really important. Mm-hmm. So talk to us about what this looks like when you work with your athletes and coaches.
Yeah, so self-talk, obviously it's exactly what it sounds like. It's the way you speak to yourself. And there are a few different types. You have your positive, your negative, but what I think is kind of the silver lining that people always forget about is there's also instructional self-talk. So it can be neutral in nature. So a lot of people don't like the sunshine and rainbows. Tell yourself that you did something well when you clearly are not doing something well.
Right.
So with athletes, I try to lean into instructional self-talk if they lean more towards negative, because it's an easier jump than going, stop saying negative things to yourself and say nice things, right? So can we find that middle ground where we're neutral and maybe we're saying something technical or tactical, something that can make an immediate change in what we're doing behavior-wise versus feelings and trying to build your own confidence.
Yeah. Well, and I think some folks in this line of work, even someone that we've had on this podcast, I won't say who, I was like, how do you get through some of these games at the level that he's working where it's just like an onslaught of just jerks, right? And he's like, I just don't feel for 90 minutes. Like, I just cut out the emotional piece for 90 minutes, and I basically and so I think that's where the instructional, like the technical side of things would probably click with him more. But because I don't think that would be, I don't think that would be it would be too big of a jump, let me put it that way, to go from negative to positive.
Yeah.
But
and this is really key in all the other mental skills we're talking about, especially with preparation, routines, error recovery, those types of things. It's what are you telling yourself in those moments as well?
Yeah.
And they have to be in your own words, right? Like I can't tell you what to say to yourself. It needs to be in the way you speak to yourself. So if you are sarcastic, you've got to stay sarcastic. If you're never going to say, "Hey, we can get the next one," don't use that as your self-talk because you're not going to believe something that doesn't sound like you. So the foundation of all of it is if it's in your own voice, it needs to be in your own words as well.
Right.
And then it has to be intentional. It can't be doing cartwheels over negative things when
Right.
you're still seething over whatever that negative thing was. And so if you normally call yourself an idiot, maybe instead we readjust to what we can do next time versus you're not an idiot, I love you, right? Like
Right.
the things that aren't believable, to me, that's what gets people off of self-talk is they think it's just supposed to be this positive interaction with themselves at all times, and that's not realistic. So how can we be neutral sometimes in a way that just gets us away from that negativity, gets us away from ruminating on something, and being unkind to ourselves?
Right. So you already mentioned it, but there's going to be times I think when self-talk becomes really crucial. So the first thing you mentioned was even before games, right? We talked about the routine all the way back in like what was that 4 weeks ago. We talked about routines. So self-talk is a huge part of that.
Yep.
Huge part of that. And then, like you said, a huge part of error recovery. And not just error recovery, but then in the moments where you feel like, okay, it's getting really stressful.
Yeah, moments that you might not feel prepared for.
Yes.
Self-talk is huge for that.
Right. And I think that I found that in my own games where I'm like, okay, things are happening. Okay. Like, have I felt this before?
Yeah.
Have I had games that have tested me in this? Have I been able to survive these moments? And I don't know, maybe that's part of self-talk is being able to come back to go, no, you have had these kinds of things and you live to talk about it.
Yeah.
You know, and coming back to that mental dialogue.
Yeah, and I think in one of the future weeks we're going to be talking about mental toughness, and that comes down to that confidence of how can we prepare for these moments, even if we've never been in them. And part of that is just the way we speak to ourselves of, I have done this before. It doesn't matter how many people are in the stands or what the score is. Like, you've done it before, and if you can instill confidence in yourself, you're going to be able to recognize those bigger moments as ones that you can navigate.
Yeah, right. So what are some of the examples that have been most successful for folks to use as far as internal dialogue?
Yeah, so some people love motivational self-talk. So, you got it, let's go. Some people honestly like yell things at themselves like in good ways. You think of powerlifters, right? Like they're not going to be like, okay, you got this, right? they have to exhibit something that produces energy for them. Right. And so it depends on your personality and what you want, but motivational lines could be the way you psych yourself up, but it's a short controllable phrase that you can repeat if you need it.
Yeah.
Outside of motivational, you have the instructional side. So maybe it's, as an athlete, it might as simple as get your feet to the ball. And so they're just telling themselves like fast feet over and over again before a play starts because they know that that's what they need. And so in officiating, there could be something of where your eyes need to be, and you can have something for yourself of that. It can be as simple as deep breath and telling yourself to breathe when there are those moments that you feel it creeping up. So it's not the same line every time. It's when you feel overwhelmed, what is a self-talk phrase that you can rely on? When you feel really good, what's a self-talk that you can rely on to continue that confidence?
Right.
Or if you just need to recover from something, how can we get our eyes focused or maybe our feet to something that we just need to shift gears away from what just happened?
Yeah. Well, and I think one of the reasons why this feels like it's deviating, but I promise it will connect.
Okay.
I think one of the reasons why referees, especially experienced referees, miss calls, miss decisions, it's not because they don't know that it's not a foul. They know what should, like if you watched it on video, you're like, yeah, that's a foul. I think most of it is two things, to go back to last week, is attention and focus. That's part of it. But I think the other thing is positioning. And so I think some of that internal self-talk is, okay, get there.
Yeah.
right? Move
Yeah.
your feet to get there. Eyes. One of the things that I said, and I mentioned this before we started rolling, was for me, it's get the next call right.
Yeah.
Like if I can focus on, and that's usually not, it is next call as far as understanding error and moving on. I think for me, it's when it feels like, okay, we're really like,
Yeah.
this is the state championship game, or this is this has, conference semifinal or conference final or something like that. And I feel under the pressure,
Right.
okay? If I allowed myself, I could get swallowed up in that.
But
if
it
I
sets
can-
yourself up for success in that
Right.
moment.
I'm going to break it down to where I can do one thing at a time.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm going to focus on this. I'm going to get the next call right. And if
Yeah.
I can get the next call right, if I can string that out over 90 minutes,
Yeah.
I have a pretty darn good game.
Yeah, and you can change it to physically what you need to do as well. So
Yeah.
maybe there's a certain positioning you have to get to in this moment, and
Yeah.
you can continue to remind yourself of that. And I think at halftime is when you can have those more motivational moments in your head of what you're doing well and what you can do well going forward.
Yeah. How much of self-talk is external, like you actually verbalizing?
Well, what's funny is, so I just read Steve Magnus's new book, Do Hard Things.
Steve, yeah.
Good,
Sorry.
great
I'm sorry.
personal friends.
I'm sorry. Yeah,
So-
Stevie and I go way back.
So it's called Do Hard Things, and it's about mental toughness, resilience, and the actual science behind it. So not the grinding out, but what toughness actually is. And part of the research is talking to yourself in the third person sometimes allows you to detach from the current situation. So if you're in a tunnel vision moment and you cannot get off the hyperfixation, instead of going, I can do this, Gordie, I can do this. The research actually shows that allows your brain to hear, like, wait, one, why are you talking to yourself in the third person, right? But
Right.
second, you are speaking in a different way to yourself, and it gets your attention in a different way. So it's interesting research. I haven't put it into practice with my own athletes yet, but that is something that I think is critical in those moments of if you're always saying, I can, switching, if I told you you could do it and I was a trusted person in your life when it comes to officiating, you'd believe me. Like you have your crew of people that you trust. And so if you can shift it into a third person, there is a level of impact where it happens a little quicker, which is what the research is showing now. But in addition, even if you just say it out loud, not only is it your internal dialogue, but now you're externally hearing it. So there's just an extra layer. So you'll see athletes do that all the time, right? You see them like mumbling to themselves or saying something like they're just going through whatever script they've created, but they're doing it in an external way. So their minds is hearing it in a different pattern than just their internal dialogue.
Yeah. Wow, that's good. Really good. Well,
So if Gordie starts talking to himself on the sidelines,
more than normal.
he is
More than normal.
He's just following the new research.
Well, and for me, we say that, but for me, like, I know the games that where I perform well is when I am more relaxed, even in the most tense moments, right? So that probably makes sense for everybody.
Yeah.
But the games and where my sense of humor stays intact. When I get really stressed, sometimes I hyper focus, and I lose those. To go back a few episodes or a few segments, I lose what I think is one of my stronger skill sets, and that is to be able to leverage humor for management, player management, diffusing situations, having empathy, listening, all that kind of thing. And so for me, I think that self-talk is like, stuff happens, and I'm almost telling jokes to myself, to like stay loose, to stay, and then, preparing for, the little moments, I think, this is so stupid, but last night, even in just a scrimmage, as basketball season starts for me, I'm sitting there going like, for me, having fun is one of the reasons why I officiate.
Of course,
One of the main reasons. So what can I do to make sure that I have fun? And that helps to remove stress, that helps keep me focused. I think that helps my performance. So even last night, they were doing it's inter-squad scrimmage, they're doing their big Monday, whatever it was, and so they were doing raffles, and I walked over to one of the assistant coaches for the teams, and I said, there's been a lot of issues with spectators and officials over the years. I think it would be a really nice olive branch if you gave me one of those baskets. I feel like I think that would really help.
Yeah.
You know, and we had a great laugh, and then, you know, this is a totally separate conversation.
Did they give you the basket?
No, I didn't get a basket. He did tell me, he said, if I could get a basket, I'd keep it for myself. And I said, now you're just being selfish.
Yeah.
But, you know, and then this is a total aside. That guy, I could go to him the rest of the night and he'd fix anything for me, right? Like, hey, coach, can you help me out? Number 12's being a real D-bag, you know? Now, it's an inter-squad scrimmage, so it's not a problem.
So it's his own players, yeah.
But if I had something where he'd be like, yeah, man, you know, I got you, right? So that's a whole other...
You know coaches do that with officials, too,
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
My assistant would always, like, be the harder one, and I could joke around, so when we needed something in a critical moment, you know?
Absolutely.
You have an official to rely on, so... Do that to yourself too, though, right? Like you said about the stressful pieces. If you try to stay loose for others, talk to yourself in the same way you would for others. Unless you're a terrible human being to others, then don't do that too.
There's a separate podcast for you. Thank you for bringing us back around. You could feel us.
Did you like that? Reins. Did you like that? I just steered it right back around.
She just jerked on the reins to get us back. So
I did. Yeah.
Well done. Self-talk. Coffee with Christina. Another week. The Check Complete podcast is brought to you in part by JF Consulting Tax Preparation and Bookkeeping. Taxes suck, we can help. I'm super excited to sit down, Travis and I, with Pro AR Ryan Graves. I am thrilled to hear some of your story. We've talked a little bit before we started recording, Ryan, about some of the recent things that we've been a part of with the coaching convention, the referee experience, and all that the referee community has provided for us. And your journey is, well, especially at the professional level, is just at the cusp. And we're excited to see where that continues to go. But you've had a memorable couple of years. I don't want to spoil it, so we'll get to that in just a moment. But we'll start with kind of what we do with a lot of our guests, is just to hear your story about how you got into officiating. So I don't know if there's a Reader's Digest version of that, but how you got started, what hooked you, and then we can kind of get into your journey from there.
Okay, great. Yeah. But first off, I just want to thank you guys for having me on. I love to talk about soccer, and I love especially the special role that referees play in soccer. So if any of my experiences can help inspire somebody or help someone else along their journey, I'm happy to share it. So I'm excited to get into these topics with you guys. But as far as for me, my journey started actually pretty young, but not too different than most. I was a young player. About 14 years old, I had played in like a local youth rec league when I was really young. And when I was 14, my mom got an email from that rec league just asking for former players to come and be officials because they were lacking officials. And it was an easy way to make money. It was a way to stay involved with the sport, something I love. So she just asked me, would you like to do this? And I said, yeah. So I went and took the class, got certified. So at 14 years old, I was doing these U7, U8, U9 rec games. And I was kind of bouncing around that rec league for a year or two. And I was working with other referees in that small rec league who were doing higher level youth games. And they told me you can get formally USSF certified and do higher level youth games. And so a couple of years later, when I was about 16, is when I first got USSF certified in July of 2010. So that's kind of where it started for me.
Interesting.
Yeah.
You know, and that's something that we've talked about. It's just the recruiting process of officiating. This is deviating slightly. I warned you that this was coming, and I think we'll back this soon, Ryan, but it is. The recruiting process of trying to get into officiating, and the role that some of those very grassroots areas play. So it sounds like that was a very formative, that local rec league that you were there for, was a very formative thing. Maybe not in getting you to the MLS, but you had to start somewhere. Right?
Absolutely. A lot of the people that I worked with just in that rec league in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, gave me a lot of tips that I used years later throughout my officiating career, because they were people that were doing the rec games, but were also higher level youth officials as well. So even in those formative years, like you said, when I was 14, 15, those tips and tricks that I learned then have applied throughout my career. And it's been super important along the way.
That is awesome. And for me, a lot of the takeaway in that is just don't ever underestimate the importance of that very early grassroots, the need for mentoring and positive interaction and all that stuff, because you never know, you might have a Ryan Graves on your hands that's going to be working. I mean, I think that's
absolutely. And I think it's really important. It's an important point to make, because, we need referees at all levels. Like, it's great for stories like mine. I made it to the MLS. I've made a career out of it. But referees at all levels are needed and they're important. And it's really important to inspire referees at that level, because at 14, 15 years old, if you're going out and doing these games and you're getting heckled by parents or you're getting yelled at, it's like the Kyle Atkins story. It's easy to quit, right? But you have those support systems from the start, those administrators, those mentors that kind of guide you along the way and keep you in it. And that's really important.
That's extremely important.
Right, Ryan, I've got to know, 14-year-old Ryan gets his first paycheck. What'd you spend it on?
Oh gosh, that's a great question. Honestly, probably more referee equipment, because I was hooked pretty quickly.
My second paycheck. Give me something good.
No, I really don't even know. I couldn't even say. It's been so long. That's what, 15 years ago now. I wish I remembered, because it was probably something that doesn't even matter. But
Good.
I hope it was more. My first refereeing paycheck came at age 31, and it went to rent. So
oh, that's awesome. Hey, whatever you got to do, right?
yeah,
That's right. I was thinking maybe Pokemon cards or something.
I had
At 31.
yeah. Oh yeah,
No.
definitely.
No.
The next Call of Duty update.
That's right. So you got started, you got into that, you kind of got your feet wet, and then now that upward trajectory continue. I shouldn't say begins, because I guess it continues, right?
Yeah.
So what does that path start to unravel? How does that look for you?
Yeah. So, like I said, in July of 2016 is when 2010 is when I got first USF certified, grade 8 certified. It's actually funny. I'll never forget it, because it was the day after I turned 16. So I got my driver's license. The first place that I drove by myself was to my USSF certification class. So I'll never forget the date. Yeah. So right after my 16th birthday. But so it started there. And then, like I said, I started doing higher level youth games and started chatting with other officials and learning that this is something that you can really move up in. You can go from grade 8 to grade 7. You can do higher level youth games, go into state cup tournaments, regional tournaments, start doing adult games. So it really kind of opened my eyes to there is that pathway that you can kind of take this as far as you want it. So I started doing that, started working through my local state tournaments. And then in 2012, I was the North Carolina youth referee of the year, which got me an invite to USYS regionals, and North Carolina's in Region 3. So I went to the Region 3 championships for the first time in 2012, and did that for several years. So a lot of my growth and development is through those regional championships, because Region 3 has a mentor program. And actually a lot of the MLS officials I work with to this day were mentors in that regional Region 3 mentor program, and I was their mentee. So I'm on the field now in my MLS career with people that have mentored me back in regionals where I got my start. So it's really kind of comes full circle. But then I kind of progress. In 2016, I graduate college, and I graduate college in 2016, and I'm kind of in the mix of working youth games, high school games, college games, semi-professional games, adult games, just trying to get as much experience as I can, right? And at some point, you're doing this huge quantity of games to gain that experience, but at some point that quantity has to change to quality. And then 2018, I get the opportunity. I'm invited into the pro development group back then. Now it's Pro 2. And then I progressed through that tier system, which culminates in me getting my first MLS game in 2020. So that's kind of the pathway I took.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that's fascinating. And I think there's a lot of the same characteristics for a lot of different folks, but the path, the general concepts are somewhat the same, but the path and how it takes place and the people that are involved in that from the mentoring side of things is different for each person. But I think that's cool. I want to just kind of repeat back to how neat it is that you get a chance to now work with a lot of the people that mentored you in the MLS, which I think is just such a cool opportunity. I can't imagine.
It really is. Yeah, it's cool to see that come full circle. Like somebody that I looked up to and got advice from and was able to apply that advice in the field, how it's worked through my career, and now I'm working the same field with them in MLS. So just that first circle is really neat.
So that's we could do a whole other trajectory about the importance of mentoring, which don't get me started about that, but that is so vital, right? I mean, oh gosh. Anyway, okay. So along your journey, were there memorable, funny, exciting, terrifying? I mean, you love the war stories. So yeah. I mean, what were some of those for you along the way?
So I'll kind of give you a serious one, and then I'll give you a funny one. So, and this kind of relates to a whole other topic, but so in 2016, I was invited to U.S. Youth Nationals for the second time. And 2016 was the time where I had just graduated college. And so I graduated college and was starting to be a young professional and starting in my career. And I had gotten invited to U.S. Youth Nationals. And I also had this internship opportunity come up right out of college. And this was the first time in my refereeing career where I now had to make a decision, a refereeing event versus a career life internship opportunity, because they were going to be the same summer. And it was the first time in my life I remember this decision. I debated over it for days, which one to take. Because like prior to that, I was in college. I didn't really have any other responsibilities. I didn't have a family, I didn't have a job, or anything else I had to consider. So this is the first time where that keeping a balance between refereeing and life came into play. And I had to turn down the opportunity to go to nationals in favor of this internship. When I graduated, my degree was in sports medicine, and the internship was with the Baltimore Ravens, being a part of their sports medicine and healthcare team for the summer, for their training camp and their OTAs and their preseason games. So I got to travel with the team. I was on the healthcare team. So it was an incredible opportunity, but it was something I had to debate over for days. And I think a lot of people can relate to that, is how do you know what decision to make in refereeing versus life if those decisions come up? And I think that's a great example in my life where I had to make that decision. So that's kind of I wouldn't call it terrifying, but it was, or exciting, but it was a very difficult decision. It was the first one I could remember.
Yeah, Ryan, I've had to let down the Kansas High School State Official Association this year because I'm just working too much. I know they were really, really looking forward to having me back on the sidelines. When I give 5-yard walls on a turf football field that has
that's another story. Yeah,
raising my flag with the wrong hand, also critical errors.
Yeah. And did you think about turning down that internship for an actually good football team, or did you stay with the
That's a great question that I will decline to answer.
If Ryan would have been there, Lamar would have been playing.
It was back in the Joe Flacco days.
Oh, there you go. There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll get to that about the balance piece kind of in our next little portion. So I want to hold on to that and kind of come back to that. But there's a lot of folks I know that are intrigued because they run into that in their referee journey, and there's decisions that need to be made. So appreciate you sharing that. But I am curious about the funny.
So the funny one, which is also exciting, was when I got my first MLS game. And it's obviously exciting for the reason that it's an opportunity that you work your whole career for. But I'll kind of give you the backstory. So in 2020, which is when I got my first MLS game, it was obviously the year of COVID, right? So we were doing assignments, pro was doing assignments a little differently. People's availability were all over the place because of COVID and all that stuff. So assignments were going out via email that year for a lot of MLS games. And so my first assignment comes across in the subject line. It says DC United versus New York City FC. And you have to open the email to see what your position is. So I scroll through the email and I see AR2 Ryan Graves. And so I'm excited. I'm elated that I'm finally getting this MLS opportunity. But then I scroll further and I look at the date, and the date is September 6th, 2020. And that is the exact date of my wife's birthday, which I always have blocked every year because my wife loves her birthday. We always celebrate it. We do something special. So, but I look at her and I'm like, I got this MLS game. I know it's your birthday, but she was just as excited as I was. She was excited for the opportunity. She was so happy I got it. And we celebrated her birthday the next weekend. But again, it's a funny story that, those opportunities are going to come at the times when you least expect them. So it's always funny to look back at that. We always joke about that now.
Did she go with you and you put her name on the Jumbotron at halftime?
She probably would have gone, but it was the year of COVID, so no one was in the stands. It was the empty stand year.
Sounds like a missed opportunity for sure.
That's great. Oh, that's good. So let's come back to the idea of life outside of ref. We get to bounce in just a minute, but what is life outside of refereeing like? You're a whole person, right? You're not just a referee.
Absolutely. So outside of refereeing, I used to work in sports medicine and healthcare. I recently transitioned ever since I got in MLS to a more flexible role. So now I work in the clinical research space, mostly in project management, helping investigational drugs kind of progress through the phases of clinical trials. So when they get to market, making sure they're safe and efficacious for patients and things like that. So that's what I do now. It's mostly remote. I work remote, so I can easily work from a hotel or take my laptop with me for games. So that's kind of what I do as a career outside of work, which is great because it's very amenable to the heavy travel demands in the season and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And we learned a new word, efficacious. That was good. Don't think I didn't miss that, Ryan. That was
Oh, okay.
25 center right there. That's good stuff. And the flexibility, I know there's a lot of referees as they're moving up the path that are going, how do I find something that can accommodate what I want to do in refereeing? And so was that a difficult switch for you to find something that fit your schedule more, or just because of your schooling and your skill set, did that happen somewhat naturally?
So it happened somewhat naturally because the jobs, what I was already in healthcare. I was already a science background, so I was able to make that transition relatively easily. But I knew that once MLS came knocking, I got the formal invitation to join pro and be full-time as an AR starting in 2021. I needed to find something that was a little bit more flexible. And so I just started looking for heavy remote work and things like that. So I think it's definitely possible. It's easier in some fields than others. Obviously, some fields you're not going to be able to find remote work, but you can usually find a way to make it work. So yeah.
Right, absolutely. So you're married and you're able to navigate that. Just make sure you have September 6th block.
That's right. Every year.
There you go. Very good. So you just finished year 2 in the MLS, correct?
I did.
As an AR in the MLS, and you had an exciting opportunity to work your first playoff game this past fall. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes.
Yeah. So talk about that. I mean, just doesn't seem super normal, right? Like a lot of ARs end up waiting a little bit longer. Referees end up waiting a bit longer. So that was, and which is a testament to your work ethic and your skill set and all that kind of stuff. What's that been like, especially now that so we talked about your journey into the MLS and then these last 2 years. What's that been like, culminating in this opportunity, which hopefully will be the first of many?
Yeah. And like you said, like I don't think anyone comes into the league expecting a playoff game within their first few years, right? That's a prize that you work towards. But I was fortunate. I worked hard and I was able to have a strong first 2 seasons in MLS, 2 strong seasons, and it culminated obviously with that playoff game last year. And first off, I want to say there's only so many playoff games in MLS each year, and therefore only so many playoff spots available to assign. And we have such an incredibly talented and elite group of officials in MLS that I believe that there are more officials that perform at a high level and are qualified to do a playoff game at the end of the season than there are actual spots to assign to those playoff games. So when I got that playoff assignment, I was of course incredibly excited, but I was humbled by the fact that I was given that assignment and as a part of such an elite group of officials when there's so many other people that could be qualified to get that. So there's a weight that comes with that. I think when you get that assignment, you step on the field and you're in that playoff atmosphere. There's a weight that comes with that you're representing not only yourself, but that other group of MLS officials that aren't on the field that night, that are equally as qualified to be there. But as far as the game goes, it was Dallas versus Minnesota. The crew, Ted Uncle's the referee, Corey Rockwell was AR1 and I was AR2. And that was a very comfortable crew. So we had worked together as a crew, the 3 of us, probably 6+ games, 6, 7, 8 games throughout the year. So we were very comfortable with each other. So for me, that kind of led to it being a little bit of an easier feeling, right? To my first playoff game, I'm going to be nervous. I'm going to be hyped up for it. But going out on the field with them, it just felt like another game because we had done it all season long. So that led to a lot of comfortability there.
Was Ted one of the referees that mentored you growing up?
He was a part of the mentor program. I don't think I was ever officially in his group, but he was a part of the mentor program. So obviously I'd talked with him. We'd known each other for a while. I'd gotten advice from him several times. So yeah, I mean, yes, he was a mentor to me.
Yeah.
Ryan, I've got to know, from a low-level referee, right, and someone who hasn't done it very long, you talked about like nerves going into the playoff game. What's something that, you've been doing this for a long time. You're obviously highly qualified and exceptional, or you wouldn't have been gotten a playoff game so quickly in your career. What are things that you get nervous about going into the game?
So, I mean, it's fun. I get butterflies and nervous before every game, right? It's just that wanting to perform at your best level. And I think that's essentially what it is. It's just you have that nervousness because you know of these expectations that are upon you, and you know you want to meet them every time you step onto the field. For me, it's consistency is key. Is my game day routine is the same whether it's a playoff game or it's a regular season game. So that helps me kind of calm down the nerves, is just being consistent in my routine, because it just feels like another game.
Just to continue on, because like earlier we talked about balance, right? And
Yeah.
Gordie specifically said you're not just an official, you're a person too, right? So I coach collegiately, but at KU, right?
Yeah.
And you know, it's interesting because from the coaching side, right, we get in the heat of the moment, right, and we unfortunately get after officials too much sometimes, right? And it's awesome to hear like the personal side of the officiating story, right? Where you guys, I mean, let's be fair, the coaches guarantee players too just as nervous, if not more nervous, right? I don't want to compare.
Yeah.
There's nerves going all the way around because everybody wants to do their best, right?
Yeah.
And so it's, as coaches, sometimes we lose the, like, I don't know, I guess we lose our
human element of the referees. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
And the fact that you guys aren't there to try and make mistakes, right? You don't,
Yeah.
we're like, oh, you're favoring the other team or whatever the complaint might be. But, you guys are there and you just said it exactly. I want to do my best.
Yeah.
I want to make sure I get the calls correct. I want to make sure that, you perform at the highest level possible. That was a really, really cool piece that, should be shared at the coaching side of the convention. I wanted you to be able to share like the individual experience with it, right? Like, it's so easy to get caught up in you guys are robots and your job is easy and whatever, like I said, I was a low level official for one high school season. So, I definitely don't understand the pressure of reffing Dallas versus Minnesota, but the Baldwin versus Eudora High School got a little feisty, and having everybody yell at me, I'm like, oh, did I make the right call? I don't know, like so it's cool.
So you talked about the crew that you were able to work with, which, I mean, that's incredible to be able to share a field with those two guys more than once, but especially for this playoff game. Let's talk about some of the dynamics of that match specifically. I mean, I'd love to hear about the game itself, maybe even the buildup. There's conversations, pre-games, whatever you'd like to share. I'm all ears.
Yeah. So as far as just going into the playoff game, right? So Ted, Corey, and I worked together throughout the season. So we were very comfortable with each other. We'd always have pregame meetings regarding the teams and expectations. But as far as like pregame discussions, we'd always touch base. But we worked so many times together and so well together that we really knew what was expected of each other. And we didn't have to have a ton of conversations just because we were so comfortable with each other. But as far as going into the game, playoff games just have a different atmosphere. Even when you're out during the warmups, I mean, it just feels differently. So going into that game, you have the nerves, that pressure to perform, that wanting to stand up to the expectation that's set for you. And once the game gets started, I think once that whistle blows, it all kind of melts away because you're just focused on the game and you're hyper focused on what you're doing and your craft, and the pressure of the game can sometimes get to you, but as long as you're focused throughout the entire game, it's going to feel like muscle memory. It's going to feel like it has throughout the rest of the season, and that consistency is going to kick in. But as far as we get into the game, I mean, it was a crazy game. It's a game I'll never forget. It was 100 miles an hour from start to finish. I had a big decision in the second half that took an offside decision that took a goal away from Minnesota. That was the go-ahead goal. I was confident in the decision. I was sure I was right, but in a playoff atmosphere like that, when your flag's up and you just took a goal away and you've got an attacker running at you, waving his finger, saying you're wrong, check the VAR, you might start to second guess yourself a little bit. But fortunately, it was right. It was a good decision. And then the game ends up going all the way to kicks. I mean, the game had everything. It was competitive, went all the way. The atmosphere is amazing. It's something I'll never forget. And then sharing that moment with the crew after we get done with the game, we come together, the game's over, just that sense of pride and accomplishment and what we had accomplished throughout the entire season. And it culminates in this performance in this game. It's something I'll never forget and something I'll cherish and certainly build on going into next year.
What's that feeling like? You make a huge decision like that, right? I'm sure you're getting chastised from the fans, players, internally. You just mentioned, did I make the right call? And then it goes to VAR. You're correct. What's going through your head at that point?
I mean, I'll be honest. It's a little fist bump in your head, right? It's like I got it right. But there's that confidence. They're like the whole time I was like, I'm sure I got this. I mean, that's one of the things as an AR for me. is I'm not going to put the flag up unless I'm 100% certain that he's offside. And that's what it goes throughout the whole season, right? Your effort and what you put forward leads to that consistency. So you're ready to put yourself in those positions to make those decisions. I will say, so I wasn't getting any crap from the fans because it was against Minnesota and it was at Dallas. So everybody was cheering for me.
There you go.
The best AR of all time.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So you talked about the success that you experienced in the first couple of years in the MLS that then led to an opportunity to officiate a playoff game. So I think the question that has popped up in my brain here is, what have been some of those successful things you've done that then provided that opportunity? Because I hear you say that and I think, okay, so then what has it been? What has it been that got you there? So what was it for you?
Yeah, I think it's tough to nail down one specific thing that's led to my success, but I think in general, it comes to preparation. Preparation before the game that prepares you to perform on the field, and that can come in many different forms. Just fitness training, making sure you're fit to get yourself in the right positions to make the decisions. Preparing yourself on the teams, the tactics, understanding the different tendencies of different teams, and also preparing yourself with knowledge of the laws, or as far as doing flash lag testing. We have these videos that we can use for tight offside decisions that help prepare us to train our brain for these quick, opposite direction offside decisions. So just, being very diligent in my preparation off the field to help me make the best decisions on the field, I think is what has led me to have a lot of success throughout my first couple of years.
Yeah. That's awesome. And that's tangible. I mean, there's some of that might be a little specific to what you're doing, but the bulk of what you've just described is something that officials at any level can do, is just making sure that you take the time to prepare and be ready. It's the same stuff you're doing on the coaching side.
I was thinking the whole time you were speaking how great this is for anybody, especially young referees. We at KU talk to our girls all the time about controlling the things you can control, so that when you get put in a stressful situation, you can fall back on your preparation, right? And if your preparation's not there, yeah, sometimes you get it right. And I feel like a lot of times in the youthful age, it's like, oh, I got that right, even though the preparation wasn't there. And there's a little like a sense of arrogance that I can get away with doing things without having to do all of the little things right. But it's when you get to your level where if the preparation is not there all the time, that the minute percentage that, cause you to be a playoff level official versus, someone who literally could just officiate Sunday league games. I can't imagine the difference to be, a great one, right? But it's the little things like that really set you apart.
Absolutely. And they add up. That certainly adds up.
Yeah. So if you could go back and tell, knowing what you know now, right?
Yeah.
Knowing what you know now in your career, if you could go back to tell first week, first month, first day, Ryan Graves, brand new referee, what would you tell him?
So, and I think Travis already alluded to it, but in officiating, there are so many things that you can't control. Assignments that you get, assignments that other people get, the decisions that come up in your games, how competitive your games are. You can't control any of those things, but there are so many things that you can control. Taking ownership of the ones that you can, and committing to putting your best effort forward for those will lead you to success. And I say effort very selectively, because everyone can always give their best effort, right? You might not be the best, but you can always give your best effort. And the things that come about that are things like fitness, barring injuries or unexpected life challenges that might take you out of your training routine. Fitness is one of the easiest things that you can control that directly affects your performance on the field, your ability to get in position, to be in the right position, to see things and make correct decisions. Knowledge of the laws of the game. Whenever you step on that field, you should know the laws of the game. Your attitude, the way you carry yourself, the way you talk to coaches, players, the way you treat them, the way you treat other officials. All of these things are things you can control that directly affect your performance and how people perceive you as an official. And I think those are always important to consider. And then don't worry about the things you can't control. Don't waste time. Take the time that you would take worrying about the things you can't control and put them into things that you can.
It's good.
You talk so much about fitness, so I've got to know. Long ball gets hit over the top. Lumen Field, you and Jordan Morris chasing it down. Who wins?
Oof. I'm gonna say me. Or I'll say I'm gonna put 110% effort in to make sure it's me. How about that?
Yeah, there it is. There it is for you.
So good, Ryan. This has been a wonderful conversation, and a lot that can be, like I said, taken away from this for people at any level. But it's great to hear the insight for what has been kind of the keys to success for you. And like I said before, we're excited to continue to see where this goes, because this is, just finished year 2 in the MLS, and there's so much more ahead. And the Check Complete podcast, along with many others, are excited to see you continue to grow and to develop and see what your career continues to unfold. It's exciting. So I guess with that, is there any other parting words for the Check Complete podcast audience, or like you're not gonna be able to sleep tonight?
I don't think so. I think I just want to thank you guys for having me on. I appreciate the opportunity to talk through my experience and share some of that. And I hope the listeners get something out of it. And I'm always reachable. I mean, I'm an open book. So if you ever see me, or just feel free to talk to me, and I'll give you what I got.
It's awesome. Ryan, thank you so much, my friend. We appreciate it.
Yeah,
Of course. Thank you so much.
The Check Complete podcast is brought to you in part by JF Consulting Tax Preparation and Bookkeeping. Taxes suck, we can help. This has been episode 23 of the Check Complete podcast. Thank you so much for listening / watching, whatever you're doing, this episode. We appreciate your support. I want to say thanks to Travis. Thanks for being here, Travis.
I'm excited that this is still going.
It is still going. We're still running ahead with this little project here. Thanks for being here and sharing some of your highlights from the last fall, and then encouraging us to reach out to Megan Mullen. Hopefully maybe Megan will see this and she can come join us. I'd love to hear your story.
I'd love to co-host the episode with Megan.
Well, you may have burned this bridge. No, that would be awesome. So very cool. Another shout out to Christina for our Coffee with Christina segment. We really appreciate her conversation about self-talk. That is great. So that's awesome. A great tool for referees to use. Like I said, in this kind of more of a high pressure environment that we find ourselves many times, that self-talk piece. Audible self-talking in an elevator, though, that can weird people out. So you got to find the right times and places to use self-talk. And another massive shout out to our featured guest, Ryan Graves, for his time with us. Just wonderful hearing his story, hearing about the success that he's found so quickly and continuing to climb that ladder. It's really exciting for us to see that, and really appreciate his time to participate in the podcast. If you have other ideas for segments, things you'd like to hear about, we would love to hear from you. Reach out to us, info@checkcompletepodcast.com. Or questions@checkcompletepodcast.com on email. Make sure you're following us on Twitter and Instagram @check_complete. You can slide into our DMs with some of those suggestions and things. We'd love to hear more from you on that. And be sure to subscribe to our channel and like our videos on the YouTubes. We'd really appreciate that. If for some reason you do have negative feedback for us, we invite you to write that on the back of the Apex Athlete Series GPS Performance Tracker from Stack Sports, retailing at $299. Send that to us, and we'll be sure to get right back on that. Travis, thanks again.
Thanks for having me.
We appreciate you, buddy. Enjoy the spring campaign with the University of Kansas, and I'm sure you're gearing up for the fall already.
Can't wait.
Just jonesing to go. Thank you for engaging with the podcast. We'll see you next time for episode 24. Take care.